Well, let's take a moment to have a little meditation review over the year and some of the things that we have experienced this year in the world and politics and the news and our lives, and just to reflect the places we've been. Just close your eyes and feel that in your body. All that you might be carrying from things you've heard, the things that make you discouraged, the things that give you hope. And think back over some of our speakers. We had Susan, who's joined us, talking about communication and our triggers. We had, last one was about democracy and the rewriting of the Constitution. We had Tom Atlee talking about wise democracy. We had Elson Haas talking about healthcare. We had Michael Ben Ali talking about the Sustainability Lab. We had, maybe you can pipe some in, Michael.
Well, our first program for this year was um, sorry, I'm just being distracted because I'm letting people in. But was David Corton, who's right. Really just such a wise, I hate to use wise elder, but just really brilliant, economist, best-selling author, and that really was a great way to kick us off. David talked about from egonomics to economics. Just how do we change the whole mindset of our culture from pillaging and extracting the earth for the greed, to fill the greed in the pockets, to where everyone works together in a collaborative nature. And ultimately, that's the secret sauce, is coming together to collaborate, because our greed-based our greed that fuels our world just doesn't work. And it's really just that small sliver of society, the 1%, but it's really less than 1% that controls the money and controls so much. So okay, keep letting people on. So Anadea, we put some topics together. So we could get the ball rolling, and then everyone's free to join in at any time. If you
oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you do want to say something, just remember to mute yourself. You could raise your hand, and you should have on the bottom bar a reactions button where you could click raise hand if you want to make it easier for us to recognize you. So,
and if you have a topic you want to discuss that we haven't addressed, you can type it into the chat and we can open that up. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we thought we would open it up with this question of, are we breaking open or are we breaking apart? Or is it both?
Yeah. And to clarify what we mean by that, you could, whether you're empathic or you watch the news or just feel the vibes of society, there's a whole lot of shit shaking down. And we have a lot of conflicts and a lot of turbulence, a lot of triggering, a lot of grievances. And the question is, are we so breaking open or breaking apart? Are we breaking open to something new and potentially momentous, a new paradigm? Are we breaking apart and leading to something cataclysmic? I think all of us on this call prefer the former, that we're breaking open, but that's the hope.
And is breaking apart part of the process of breaking open? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Anadea. That it's almost the way forward is the way through is moving through a lot of breaking open, letting go of old baggage, or are the things that don't serve us, and it's really, it can be disheartening at times to see what we're doing to each other, but it also can be heartening to see, not to be Pollyannish, but to realize all the good that's going on also in the world. When we had Mark Nepo on and we interviewed him back in May, I mean, that's a big part of Mark's talking and espousing is this breaking open, kind of the soul knows and the soul's path. And a day, that's a lot of your work over the years with chakras and that transformation.
And initiation, that we're going through the initiation. But I really, people have heard us all year. I want to open it and hear who would like to speak into the discussion, who has something to share. Again, you can raise your hand like this, or you can hit the reaction button. That's probably the best way if we have several.
Yeah, it's great to see so many people on the call. It's wonderful. We've kept it to a webinar format when it's usually just the three of us, Anadea, myself, and the interview subject. So I know we always feel like, we feel bad for people that are watching it, but they can only talk to us through the chat box. So now we can hear you.
I would like to know, for those who have been listening to, various of our series, and I'm sure no one's caught all of them, but what ones have stayed with you? What speakers did you feel inspired by, moved by, what stayed with you?
I can list them all. As I said, the first person this year was David Corton, talked about economics to economics. Then Tom Atlee talking about wise democracy. Then we had Stephen Post, fascinating conversations on synchronicities and universal mind. Then we talked with Mark Nepo on soulful wisdom. And after that was Kristen Noth, the futurist, who talked about how to affect transformative change. Then after that, we talked with Michael Ben-Eli, the founder and director of the Sustainability Lab. And then after that, we had a little satire with Steve Barriman, Swami Byandananda, who talked about time to wake beyond woke, the great upwising. Then we met and had Elson House on. Elson is a legendary integrative physician, wrote Staying Healthy with the Seasons. Then we had a really heartfelt conversation with Mark Dubois, the environmental activist, on lessons from the river, love's great global emergence. Then we had Susan Campbell, who is gracing us being on the call with us. Susan is a psychologist and talked about thriving in a world of exponential change and conflicting worldviews. Then our last two interviews of the year were both talking about politics and democracy. The first was David Nevins, the founder of the Bridge Alliance, talking about bridging the partisan divide in America. And our most recent conversation with constitutional scholar Bo Breslin on rewriting the Constitution, which was really fascinating, just the idea of it. And as Bo pointed out, that was Thomas Jefferson's idea, belief right from the start of the beginnings of the birth of the US, that the Constitution should be rewritten every generation, and that why should the dead, as Thomas Jefferson wrote, have lord over the living? So yeah, so we had a lot of ideas over the course of the year, a lot of great people. So yeah, so as Anadea asked, if anyone wants to speak on who they thought was really stood out, or really someone that they really connected with.
And also you can share what you'd like to see in future guests for next year.
Oh yeah, we're always open to that. We're hoping to have somewhere in the first part of the year Paul Hawken on. I've been in touch with either his brother or son, who has led me to believe he's willing, and he's wanted me to get back to him in January to see. Hopefully, you all know Paul Hawken is the great environmentalist and brilliant author of so many books. And at a day we're hoping to get Peter Russell back. Peter was going to be on in October or November, and then he went off to England. So we'll be recontacting him.
Michael?
Anne.
Yes, this is Anne. I like I like Bo Breslin in terms, maybe it's just because I remember him the most because he was the most recent, but I really enjoyed that conversation. The other thing I want to say is you don't have a lot of women. You only had one woman, right?
Oh, that's
Susan,
interesting.
we
Let's
had
see.
Kristen, we had
Kristen and Sue.
So I hope for the future, when you're asking us what we'd like for the future, I'd like to see more women intellectual minds here.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. That's
good on you. Yeah, I would too. I definitely would. Yeah. We're open to suggestions.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good
I
point.
want to have someone from the Women's Earth Alliance on. Those women are doing amazing work in the world, so I want to reach out to them early in the year.
Yeah, and then when we interviewed Mark Dubois, you talked about it because you know his wife, right? Claire Dubois. And what's her organization?
Tree Sisters.
Tree Sisters.
She's reforesting, and she's done amazing work with that. So she would be a good candidate also. But yes, I hear you, and I think you're exactly right, and I've noticed the same thing. Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm glad you did. I wasn't even, here I am, part of the patriarchy. I wasn't even thinking about it. But you're right. I just looked at the list.
So many of you have come on today to have this discussion. You must have things you want to bring forth and discuss. Yeah, Julianne.
Hi. Yeah, I want to say I really enjoyed all of the speakers because sometimes listening to the news and hearing and talking about what's going on, I feel kind of helpless, like what could I possibly do to make a difference? And just listening to other people and knowing that there are so many people out there doing their thing to make the world a better place is really heartening, and brings me some peace of mind that what each of us do, our own small little parts, could add up to something much greater. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Julianne. Yeah, the as some people call it, the wicked problems that we face are just way too big for any one person, even if they're a savior. It's really all of us. And out of Harvard a few years back came a study that has been called the 3.5% rule, that says that nonviolent movements that engage 3.5% of the population, that at that magic number, have always been successful. So, I mean, 3.5% of the population is, let's say just of the US, is still, might be 5 or 10 million, but it's not every person needed. And that also reminds me that some of these, as Julianne was saying, like watching the news, sometimes it can be really disheartening. But a lot of that stuff, especially the stuff that we see that shows the U.S. in trouble, is really just a small amount of people who are really causing the issues. Whether it's that small amount of people, politicians in Congress who are just really crazy, or as many people point out, the tyranny of the minority that we find in this country. But they are the minority, and they know how to scream loud enough and know how to do crazy things that gets lots of publicity, and so we just hear of them. Where the those who are working towards a better future, they usually aren't partial to histrionics.
A friend of mine that I was speaking with recently made a good point that I hadn't quite put together. He said, throughout history, there have always been these extremists, these crazies, but they have been geographically separated. There's a couple in every community, and mostly they're kind of marginalized and ignored, and they don't gain much traction. But the internet has allowed them to connect with each other and create a force. And create a force among people who are geographically disconnected but have the same ideology, and then they get online and they feed each other, and that has created a force that has made the extremists more powerful than they ever were in the past, even though there may not be more of them. We're more aware of them and they're more connected.
Yeah, that's
That's Newtopia. And
Yeah, hi.
Hey
I enjoyed about rewriting the Constitution, and it seems like we really need another constitutional convention. A lot of liberals that I've talked to are really scared of that, because they think that the right wing could take over in a constitutional convention. But it seems like to me we just need to air out so many ideas. And once we do, if we have public debate, then, those ideas that are just really not going to work to solve our crisis can be brought out into the open at least. But then really, Anadea, in your newsletter, you talked about matriotism as opposed to patriotism. And I think that is a great idea. I think that women could really get in back of that. And I'd like to see some kind of social movement, towards that, and all the good things that could happen if we brought that idea forth.
Yeah, let me clarify that, because I've never said that we should have a be a matriarchal society versus a patriarchal, because I think that's the same thing in reverse. So I've never said that. What I've proposed is that we create a Matriot Act that would be just like the Patriot Act, only saying the threat to Mother Earth is so severe that if we don't take a lot of our financial and intelligence and all that toward it, our national and global security is threatened. It's not threatened by people on the other side of the world who are terrorists. It's threatened by our own actions that are, destroying the earth. And the Matriot Act would be about making that a priority.
In the future,
Oh, well, obviously, I love to travel and see new cultures, have conversations, and get.
Okay, Amy, you had something on that was, I just muted you. Okay, go ahead, Anadea.
I think so I never wanted a matriarchal society versus a patriarchal. I think we go to a partnership society where men and women are working together.
I realized that from your essay.
Act that I was writing about.
Yeah, and that's why, if you say it's an act, you can work through the Congress to get a bill.
It would be, and that's why, basically.
That's why it's powerful.
A tremendous amount of intelligence and funds toward the things that we really need to, combat climate change and save the oceans and, all the regenerative things that, Paul Hawken talks about, that we can fund those things so that they can really happen. And I think that's a bigger threat. Not doing so is a bigger threat to our national security and global security than anything else that exists right now.
And I would just wonder, do you see a way forward with making that a political movement?
I don't know how to do it. I need someone who is a politician and knows how to write bills to get on board with it. I'm going to a conference in January and hoping I can get the idea planted and some people there. But I don't know really where to take it. I've talked about it and hoping somebody will spark with it and want to run with it. I don't have to hang on to it at all. If somebody wants to run with it, they've got my 100% support.
Yeah. Ugo Chipwa, did you have your hand raised? If let's see, I'm not sure. I was told you did. If you did, you could unmute yourself if you're muted.
Mr. Ekikora, did you have your hand raised?
Did you have your hand raised? Oh, maybe not.
Looks like it. You can speak. I think it's best if people use the reaction button because a hand can flash and go away and we don't see it, but the reaction button will line them up and we'll take them in order.
Yeah. So yeah, use the reaction, and then click on the reaction, and then there's the raise hand button. So I just wanted to add to what Anadea and Dr. Neutropia were talking about in terms of two of our speakers, that Dr. Neutropia and Anne mentioned about rewriting the Constitution, Bo Breslin talking about it based on the book he had just written, The Constitution for the Living, and then also Tom Atlee. And they both talked about Bo Breslin in the last chapter of the book, when it was the 2022 Constitutional Convention. He started off the chapter talking about what happened in Iceland in 2009, I believe, when everything fell apart. That's where or 2008 or 7, that's where the global financial crash started. And as Iceland was rebuilding, they rewrote their constitution, and they started by crowdsourcing their constitution, taking input from everyone. And then Tom Atlee talked about, if for those of you who are on the call, virtual Taiwan, where Taiwan also changed their government, made it more open by crowdsourcing. So that's a big way, like Anadea talking about your idea of the Matrix Act, how could this be? But really opening it up to making our if we're just talking about the US, making it more of a direct democracy, which we are far from, and which is part of the tyranny of the minority and the democracy in the US being in trouble, is how indirect it's become, and leaving a lot of people just jaded, and a lot of people grievance, talking about how the elites are taking everything from them, and just going off into a whole delusional reality with that. There's truth to it, not to negate that, but also it's way too extreme. So that would be a big thing. Maria, in the chat box, you put in Marianne Williamson, maybe. Could you explain what you were meant? Not to put you on the spot, but.
I was just thinking, I remembered Anadea saying she was at one of her things or got to meet her. And I was thinking if anybody could help you with your matriarch idea, it might be her.
I actually spoke to her about it. And
Okay.
she loved the idea, but she was busy running for president at the time. And it's not like I know her well. But we did have a conversation, and I spoke to her about it, and she's read my Global Heart book. And I mean, she really liked the idea, but I think that's had she gotten farther with her run for president, she might have done something, or, if she were in office. But we need someone that's in Congress or the Senate to you know, or someone that knows someone that can get that, people who know how to write bills and propose it. And the question is, would something like that get passed in this climate, you know, in this political climate? You know, the new Green New Deal had enough trouble, you know, and still has trouble. And the Matriot Act would be probably even a little more radical. And it would be everything from, you know, preserving nature to, you know, fighting domestic violence and things like that, you know, things that, and preserving women's right to choose and, you know, things that have to do with women. But
Well,
primarily nature and Mother Earth. But
well,
yeah.
I wouldn't give up on her because she had a shoulder injury and then her daughter just got married. So maybe this would be a good time to try again
Yeah.
because she might at least give you the entree to somebody else. But you know, you're published, you're out there, you know, give yourself a few pats here, okay? Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, you're on equal footing.
Well,
So, all right. I mean, in terms of the knowledge you share. So, and since I've got the floor and then I'll shut up. The one that kind of worked for me personally, and I have not had a chance to listen, was the Susan Campbell one. I just listened to you today. And personally, I had a friend from Chile. I think I sent you a note, but my reaction and the whole point about triggers was helpful. And the only thing I would like to put out there, two things, is, you know, we're concerned very much about the right, you know, trying to dictate and trump, et cetera, et cetera. But in the argument that you had today, Susan, Dr. Susan, with that lady, you know, I've gotten to know, well, like there are some doctors that are well established that have differences of opinion that are literally being, so I think some of that dictatorship stuff is going on both sides. And I think it would be interesting to have a discussion among those people, invite them to one of the panels, and, you know, Pam Popper, Dr. Christian Northrup, some of those people are coming to mind, and figuring out how we can have, because as Bill Mayer says, we're all talking about the one thing, when we're not talking about the bigger issue, which is greed, as it relates to healthcare, as it relates to the food we consume, as it relates to all this other stuff. So I'm looking forward to a balanced discussion about this quote virus, which has become the common enemy when we don't really know who our enemies are. And I watch the French news, the Swiss news. This is not just happening here. It's a global issue. So, and then as to media, the only other thing I'm going to ask, in the past, we didn't have truck drivers that could, today on our news, where they actually saw a shootout on the highway 2 blocks from me. This may have been going on, but we didn't have the technology to watch this stuff. So to what degree is what's going on now new? And to what degree are we just more aware of it because of the technology? And that's it. Thank you. And I really appreciate this. And I have a couple of critters listening too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of it is the technology is multiplying our awareness of it. And like I said, also allowing extremists to connect with each other in a way that they didn't before. I noticed that Michael Ben Eli got on the call and he was one of our speakers early on. So I just wanted to welcome you into the discussion. He talked about the sustainability lab and systems theory. And I really loved your talk. One that really stood out for me. And so nice of you to join us. So I just want to point out that he joined us. If you want to ask any questions of him or weigh in, and we're having a discussion of whatever comes up for people and what they liked over the year, and what questions they have and what they'd like to see next year.
Yeah,
so thank you,
Michael. Thank you for joining us. Good to see you.
Pleasure.
For anyone who's not familiar, didn't see the interview we did with you, or Michael, or are not familiar with your work, the Sustainability Laboratory, could you, kind of in a nutshell, which may not be easy, tell us what your work is? This is so important.
Well, I don't mean to take too much time here, but basically the lab was established in order to demonstrate application of some sustainability principles in different development projects in different parts of the world. And we use those principles to drive both our projects and various educational programs that we have as well. This is in a nutshell, and you can add some more if you like. But
yeah, and you've been doing an interview series for most of this year, and you have one coming up next week. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fascinating. Actually, we decided to do that. It's a conversation that takes place once a month. We call it it's about the sustainability challenge, so to speak. And we are exploring different sustainability related issues with noteworthy scientists and others. So we looked about the science of climate change, the issues of biodiversity, desertification, green or beyond economics, and so forth. And the last session for the year, which will take place, I think, next week, I believe, it's about art and sustainability.
Oh.
Exploring really the role of culture in kind of helping move society along, if you like, in new directions.
Wonderful. Could I trouble you to put that information in the chat box for us all? I would, for one, really like to tune into
or just
that.
where people could go to be able to sign up, watch, about.
I don't know. I can try to do it. I am not sure if I'll be successful because I'm somewhat technology challenged.
Is it just like people go, I could put in, let's see, sustainability lab.
You must have received the notification for it. Even today, there was one sent out.
No, I get them and I look at them.
So if you can do it for me.
I'll put in your main, let's see, the homepage of your website. Will people be able to find the way to the
No,
talk?
you want to get that specific announcement because it has the link to the registration.
Okay, well, there's the main website, and let's see if I can find it. Or let's see.
Okay, well, Susan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I had my question formulated before Michael came on here. So hi, Michael.
Michael, Susan was one of our other speakers in the series.
And we've been talking a bit about how technology has created opportunities for people who haven't had much support to really, congregate on the internet and so forth, like 4chan, 8chan, all of those kind of people. I would love to see a future program with somebody who's really internet savvy to create some kind of a national voting by internet.
Oh, yeah.
As a check and balance against the voting that happens by the US system right now. I personally am kind of concerned about voting rights and where that's all going. But in the spirit of, is it a breakdown or a breakthrough? Sometimes we have to mistrust our authorities even more to find our own empowerment as citizens. So I've always been a kind of an advocate of citizen empowerment, and they're not doing such a good job. So what are we going to do about it? Yeah. I'm not that internet savvy, but I've heard of different people who do have visions like that, or even have done something like that, where issue polling, or just a check and balance on the actual presidential and congressional elections. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. It's an issue of concern for me, and so technology can really help us too.
Yes, there is someone who has something called Democrasoft, and he's
Uh-huh.
dropped out of the limelight, but he was working exactly on that. And he's a
Wow.
guest that I have wanted to have on, actually. I'm
Yeah.
going to look him up right now.
That'd be great. I really want to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
You can look at democrasoft.com.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was saying earlier, not too long ago, there are already countries around the world doing this kind of thing, bringing technology in it. So it's not like we have to reinvent the wheel. You know, I talked about Iceland when they rewrote their constitution, starting out by having crowdsourcing. You know, these are, with, as you pointed out, Susan, with technology, there's so many things you can do, and it's almost this tide of change towards something better is up again. It's almost like a dam that's stopping the chi of bringing this change to fruition, and like when water goes rushing against a dam, a lot of times sooner or later the dam starts to weaken, and then water finds its way through. So in a way, this is what we're all advocating for, democracy and working towards going through that resistance. And,
Just having a phrase, Michael, the dam of denial.
the dam of denial.
When is there going to be enough water coming up against the dam of denial?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
Coming
right.
up for me right now.
Well said, Susan. I like that.
I'd actually like to speak to that a little bit, not the dam of denial, but this breaking of the dam and what's breaking apart. And this is some of the theses that I put forth in the Global Heart book, but that in this rule of the static masculine, which is the phase we've been in, where from a more chaotic, we went into the static masculine that wants law and order and control and separating things out, and you know, it is a static system which we needed for a certain stability a long time ago. But you can't hold a static system in place in a dynamic universe, in a dynamic, evolving ecosystem. And so it's bound to break up against it. And the static masculine, by its very nature and definition, wants to hold on. It says, don't take this away from me. Don't let this break open. But nature is dynamic and fluid, and you can't hold a static system forever. So the part that's breaking apart is the part that is that static, you know, cement. Sometimes I see it almost like a scab that has to come off, and there's new healing, the new skin underneath that is emerging, that is the regeneration of nature that is trying to push off this static straitjacket that's been on it for the past, you know, 2,000 to 5,000 years, depending on how you want to count, you know.
Yeah, and it's like the phrase Susan used, the dam of denial. It's just it's less, its hold is getting tenuous, and as its hold gets tenuous, it grasps even more, holding on for dear life. Some of you may know, I put in my emails that I've written a book. It'll come out somewhere in the first part of next year, called Beyond the Pandemic Toward a More Perfect Union. And I really went deep in the weeds in understanding what's that the dam holders from Wall Street to the Koch network to big tech, and they're such a small minority, but they're just holding that power out of fear and greed, and you know, it's affecting our personal lives, and it's affecting, which is bad enough, and it's affecting the environment, and you know, we're all kind of seeing how it's affecting the environment and the climate, and you know, it's not what we want to see, and so it's all up to us to keep going. Grace, you have your hand up, so you just have to unmute yourself, Grace.
Yeah, and we do want to keep it concise.
Yes, I'm so glad for what you're saying just now, Michael. Wonderful that you're writing that book. And I feel that I've been trying to write about this. We need a world that works for all economically and politically. We can't have a UN or international situation where small countries have no voice and it's all about who's biggest and the race for the top. So as we move out of the race for the top in companies, try to work into a universal profit sharing and value for the people, and we move out of a profits-oriented mentality, we've got to make everybody have a voice. So that's how we're going to have peace in the world, when everyone has well-being. Everybody has territorial security and well-being for their people, and economically. We can't have it be about who's the biggest. We can't have it about competition, this country or entity or against the other one. And I don't know how to do this, but I'm trying to write to motivate the UN to reform, and for us all to reform our thinking, so that every party, just like in our country, we believe in this, we have to make it true for the world. And just in our country, there are laws protecting worker rights. We need to protect people who are at the end of the profit of the supply chain for the goods we buy. We have to protect their working conditions, their wages, that their health benefits. We need to be responsible in all of this. And I think these changes are essential, and I'd love to know how, I'm trying to write about it, but how to begin to speak to, I mean, common sense to Wall Street, or, I mean, if we care about our future, if we care about our children, if we care about peace, if we care about being the human beings we're capable of, can we appeal to that and cut through the profit narrow, I want another house, I want another car, I want another status symbol, I want this or that or this, without thinking of the consequences of their behavior? Can we do that? And I also think that money is controlling the GOP. I wonder if there could be some.
Let's stick to one topic at a time, Grace.
Sure.
You know, because you bring up something and then you go on to another topic before we can respond, and we got some other people with hands up. But
and one really quick thing, can I say one quick thing?
I think what you're speaking to is the shift between the focus on the individual rights, individual freedoms, individual selfishness, and the greater good. And, you know, there was this book, From Good to Great, and I like to say from good to great to the greater good. You know, how do we actually look at, and the pandemic is a perfect teacher for that. You know, how do we look at our behavior in terms of the greater good? Even though you might not want to wear a mask, how do you cooperate as a citizen to not infect other people and be willing to wear your mask? And, you know, vaccination is another question in that. But, you know, I think that greater good. But Susan, you had your hand up and you've been waiting a bit.
Yes, in view of what you were saying about breaking down the dam, I just heard the other day about the percentage of young people who think climate change is the #1 problem and really want to do something about it. Like, I would love to have somebody from the youth movement give it, you know, invite them to give a talk too, and give them some more support in what the other Susan was saying about doing some other kind of voting system, maybe like having high schools also have an election in the school, and so it would become public what young people, you know, what their choices are in government, and how they want the laws to be, and where they want the emphasis to go on combating climate change and things like that. Might be really interesting. And another thing, maybe a speaker on like Rupert Sheldrake or somebody who talks about breaking this dam, maybe from the level of silence, like influencing from the very subtle level, how if we created in the underlying field, we can create great change by just putting an impulse there. If everybody was doing it at the same time or in the same way, or, you know, with the same kind of intention or something, maybe that might be helpful.
Thank you, Susan. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
I've written that down. Yeah, Rupert Sheldrake would be great.
Yeah, and thank you, Susan. Also, just, you know, mentioning about young people. You know, there's the climate justice group Extinction Rebellion, which was founded by, and then another one, Zero Hour, both founded by people, millennials, and they're the ones who see a future that if realizing that if we don't do something soon, it's going to be trouble. So that's really important. And they're the ones who've been most vocal. And one thing that's really a hope of the future is that all these people, millennials, and they kind of use this cliche term Gen Z and whoever else, whatever the next generation after that will be called, as they become old enough to vote, the millennials are already, they're voting more liberal, left of center, progressive, green. Even the conservative young people, except for a smaller percentage, even they are a little more open-minded and moderate. But this is a tide that can't be stopped, no matter how much the Republicans try voter suppression. Not that we want to have to wait 10, 20 years as all these younger people come of age and become the groundswell of the voting public. We all want to be, no matter our age, involved and active and in whatever way. But this voter suppression can only, it's like another part of that dam that's going to have to break, the dam of denial. It can't withstand this tide. So it's a good point, Susan, about that. So yeah, and speaking of which, I mentioned hope. Let's move into that subject of hope. I'd like anyone who would like to say, what gives you hope? Where do you see hope? These days, it's a commodity that makes us might feel in short supply.
In our series, Voices for the Future, our intention was to have people who are creating something that would make a more positive future for us, and that we would get hope out of it, out of things that people are doing to make change and bring awareness and action in the world that would bring hope. So, the most hopeful thing that I have read lately is Paul Hawken's book on regeneration. And every single page just sang with a hopefulness of what nature does when we get out of the way and let her do what she's has done for long before we came on the scene. And if I think that should be required reading for everybody.
I had as far as hope goes, hope really focuses and considers the future, and we want to be focused on the future. And hope is faith holding out its hand to the dark. Somebody said that. And it's like Plato said, it's easy for us to support a young child who's afraid of the dark, but the real tragedy is how the adults are afraid of the light. And there's one more. Thank you for your time. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're a little muffled.
I can talk closer. Anyway, went to a workshop weekend with John Below McKilzadek. Do people kind of know him? John Below spent a large part of his life, he's an author, and in the South America and Central America. And he talked about how modern folks like us can say, there is the tree over there. And the indigenous people say, there am I in the tree over there. And that's the kind of paradigm shift that happens. Because if we can all move towards that way of being and thinking and empathy and consideration of others, and it's missing. So that's the goal. Spread that as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. So there are
Susan,
you and all of us in
Hmm.
the future together.
Yeah, yeah. Susan has her hand raised. Susan.
So I'm responding to what gives me hope.
Uh,
And I want to start with that Einstein quote: you can't solve a problem at the level that the problem was created. So I'm actually thinking, and Peter, you just mentioned a paradigm shift, that there is, I mean, for a long time, there's been a kind of paradigm shift. And part of that to me is more and more of us are thinking systemically. I mean, you know, even the Black Lives Matter conversation has gotten much more to looking at systemic racism over the last 10 years and speaking about that. I'm part of this big worldwide authentic relating community. And you know, it's kind of based partly on my Getting Real work, where we consciously develop the witness. And even in the trigger work that I talked about when I was on your show, there's a way of doing inner psychological work that helps you get above the us versus them and begin to see it can't just stay at that level, or we're just going to be, like you said earlier, Anna, we're just going to be exchanging one domination paradigm for another domination paradigm. That won't work. So there's something about being able to develop, and of course, mindfulness and Eastern religions, you know, ever since Ram Dass and before, you know, there's more and more of the population. I don't know if what it takes to get a critical mass, people who are actually thinking in new ways and not either or. And even it's kind of both and we are all of that. You know, Peter mentioned sort of a unity consciousness that's coming, because I think that's what grows out of being more systemically aware and not identifying with one pole or another. So I actually have hope for that. So let's find ways to implement that in our daily activities.
Well, I would I would say the whole discussion kind of revolves around how we understand life looking backwards and we live it moving forward. So it's using our experience and our past in a positive way and moving it towards a different future. But what you're saying there is really what Melchizedek was pointing out about, you know, just being in that place, but not be considering, you know, putting all the experience in some kind of hierarchy and quotient of necessity or something, and just, you know, we're all one. We're one with the trees. We're one with the earth. And it's just got to be there. It's not a matter of words. It's words, thoughts, feelings put into action,
That's
which
right.
may just be being nice to someone in the grocery store.
Thank you. Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah, I just want to add on to what you're saying, Peter, when you were talking before. It reminded me of when we had Mark Dubois on, and if any of you saw our interview, he was such a beautiful human being and quite a storied past. What he did in the past when he chained himself to a rock to stop the Army Corps of Engineers from flooding a river, challenging them to flood him, drown him in the process, and he stopped them. But Mark, and you can go to the Voices for the Future link to see the interview you had. But one of the things Mark said, which was just so profound and kind of also talks to what we're saying, is that he said, here in our society, at least American society, really American society, we've at this point have granted personhood to corporations. And so the question is, why haven't we granted personhood to nature, to the trees, to the animals, to nature in general? And that's really, and really they need equal rights because there's no one speaking for them. We speak for them, but the interests that find it better to extract from the earth, really, they have the nature has no power, and but they need to be granted personhood too, and that's something Native society, indigenous peoples have always felt, as you were pointing out, Peter, connected to the earth, to the spirits of everything, and always giving thanks to their food, to anything they use from the earth, and always trying to find a way to give back to the soil. And that's one big problem of our society that we live in. We live in a very consumption-based society. So I think from what I've read, our society is based on 80% consumption and 20% investment. And even like any farmer, anybody who grows food knows that anything you take out, you have to plant back. But where we want that extraction-based mentality, we're willing to take out whatever, but not put back. And whether it's planting seeds or investing in human capital, social investment, this is really a key a part of this paradigm shift. So I'll stop there. Grace has her hand raised, and I'll cede the floor to her.
And I might like at some point to share a poem I wrote about giving a voice to nature in democracy.
Yeah.
But Grace, go ahead.
That sounds beautiful. That sounds beautiful. I'm first of all so grateful to both of you. I love this. I've missed some of the talks. I want to hear the ones I've missed. I don't know why I didn't get emails always, but I love this. I love what you're doing. I hope you keep doing it. And I hope this can become a voice. I don't know how, maybe it's social media, maybe it's writing letters or speaking up, how to create a movement, how to create more and more of a movement that can actually alter things. So I really believe, along with nature, the same thing. I love what people are saying about the American Indians, or the Indians saying that, seeing himself in the tree. If we could do that with each other throughout the world, and the more we realize our interconnection, and the more we work for what you were saying just now, Michael, about social capital and investment, about people, I would just really like to see our economists and our thinkers, as well as our politicians, and all of us speaking up to create a systemic change so that human value is put first. What does it make a life of dignity? What does it makes for happiness? They've shown, for example, that generosity raises happiness. These things that are good raise levels of happiness. How can we shift the discussion, or especially in the West, where it's not about profit, it's not about competition, it's about fulfillment and sharing, not losing the individual, really valuing the individual, showing that there is a beauty in the individual, and combining that with a community consciousness, that we can just build that and imagine that, and not go in the old either ors. Isn't it time in the quantum universe for us to reach to something greater that we can be, and not the either or, communism or democracy or something like that, or we need to, and especially with the totalitarian movement, we've got to really call on ourselves to imagine something new and begin to create it. I think a lot of it's economics, a lot of it's how we communicate in our politics, and I would just love to see you guys get behind this. You're just so wonderful, all that you're doing. So, and I think it's connected with nature. It's all connected. We're all connected. We're part of nature, and we're part of each other. And my sister has cancer right now, and I've been looking up a lot about holistic healing. It's like our world has cancer, and what we need is holistic healing for our world. And the same kind of uplift and nutrition and nourishment and what's healthy. And I don't know, about cyclical economies, like you were saying, putting back in, right? Where we're not extracting. What does that mean? Elon Musk going off to other planets or places to live? How horrible, Can't we make it work here? Can't we, cycle back in and everything, and just make that part of what we do, and think of innovation in a different way. Anyway, thank you so much. Love you guys.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, Grace. Amy put in a couple of chats up the link to, she said it saw a film about this happening in New Zealand, where New Zealand granted legal personhood to a specific river, just like I was talking about, giving personhood. So she has the link in there. I already clicked on it. So if you want, feel free to click on it so you have it on your computer and you can read it later. So thank you, Amy. That was really good. And some of these countries, these social democracies really are at the forefront of these kind of things. And America is lagging behind because of this predatory capitalist approach that of individualism versus as opposed to collaborative and social cohesion. And it's if we don't get with the program, it won't end well.
But we're drawing you out on what gives you hope.
Yeah.
Michael Van Ely, what gives you hope? You work with sustainability and systems and in many countries. What gives you hope these days?
I got the hope again. What the hope? What?
What gives you hope?
What brings me hope? Well, two things really. One is the faith in the conscious intelligence that is embedded in in the cosmos of which we are a part.
Mm-hmm.
One. And the second, of course, is the growing awareness, especially among young people, even if not kind of expert knowledge, but the gut understanding that things are not going right and their natural capability of exploring for new ways of doing things. I think that's the way nature goes around impossible situation. That's how evolution actually functions, that you reach an undecidable proposition, the context shifts, and what you've been doing before is no longer relevant.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to try and look for, experiment with new ways. And I see so much energy that really didn't exist even 10 years ago among young people. And really the numbers are exponential. So I think this is a source of hope. Of course, the challenge there is whether the time, whether we have enough time for all this new energy to mature in time.
Mm-hmm.
So hope, of course, also has the connotation of the other side of hope, right? Hope is not enough here, actually. It's really, you need to go beyond hope to deeply understand the nature of the challenge that we have and begin to experiment, because we don't have a cookbook to tell us what to do, but we have some intuition that we need to follow.
And Michael, you work with a lot of young people from many countries, right? All around the world. Yeah.
So this is definitely, you can see, you know, excuse me, one of our graduate level kind of program, the Global Sustainability Fellows Program, basically takes in for summer sessions young people from different disciplines who want to get a deeper exposure to the concept and challenges of sustainability. And you can see in the selection process of these youngsters, they are as good as any. These are young people from all over the world, from all countries, who could choose any kind of career. They can become investment bankers tomorrow, but that's not what they are interested in. They're not interested in the usual kind of career track. They really want to do something right and to contribute to the well-being of the planet as a whole. So it's very interesting to see that, because it's genuine, it's really authentic, it's really true. And the question, of course, is how for everybody else to support that swell of young life trying to do the right thing. rather than stand on the way. And this is why whoever raised that question earlier, I think it's so important. What is the governance right of children, who sometimes know better than us because they've not been corrupted yet? So I think that's a fascinating subject that if you could find people to explore with, will be really great.
Yeah, we should get some young people on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Not too many white hair here.
Yeah. So Anadea, we had a second part of that question of what gives you hope that we'd like to put out to everyone. And that is, what would a hopeful future look like to you? So anyone wants to chew on that? And that's the bigger challenge. We can all be hopeful, but what would that hopeful future look like? There's a famous Spanish proverb that goes, "Traveler, roads are made by walking." So we are all creating something that perhaps hasn't fully existed. When democracy was created in the United States, there was only fledgling democracies. The Iroquois nation had a democracy for hundreds of years leading up to the US democracy, but the US democracy didn't have a lot to go on, and they created something, still kind of a work in progress, but the same thing with, what would a hopeful future look like? So it's, someone talked about, I think it was Grace, talked about getting away from either or to a both and. How do we integrate systems where, and there are countries on this planet that are doing a far better job of integrating it. I talk, the social democracies, and especially the Nordic countries that are doing a far better job. And it shows in the well-known the Global Happiness Reports that is put out by the UN every year since I think 2011 or 12. And the social democracies always end up in the top 10, and the Nordic countries always end up in the top 5. And the United States is number 18. We have a lot more problems here in terms of creating happiness. So that's a big question. But we have role models to go toward, what we can go towards. So it's a question where we have to create something new, but we're not reinventing the wheel. It's there already. And one of the things about social democracies where there are strong social safety nets in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory and self-actualization. When we have a country offering, a social democracy offering a strong social safety net, the citizenry has a better chance, has an easier opportunity to self-actualize, even if they don't use that term or even think about it, because they can go towards more meaning and what life really is about, and what is our place on the planet, and have trust with their communities, because they're not struggling to make ends meet or struggling to make sure they don't end up on the streets. So again, that's part of what that hopeful future could look like, is just the ability for everybody to have the potential to self-actualize, even if they're not thinking about it in that term, but just to have basic needs met. And it's such an important thing. And in a world, or even just the US, where I think it's something like 8 people in the US have more money than 50% of the population, there's something really askew with an economic system that allows that to be created. And so
those 8 people have enough money to correct just about everything we've got going wrong if it was put there.
Yeah. And it's not like, and it's also, as pointed out by economists, it's not like we're asking those 8 people or that small cadre of people who have so much wealth to set up charities and foundations to fund it, because that's creating a supra government where we're allowing 8 or 10 or 20 or 50 or 100 people to dictate who can be helped. It's instead, as Thomas Piketty has pointed out in Capital in the 21st Century, we need things like a global wealth tax where people are paying a fair share instead of moving money into tax havens and evading taxes, so that its government can make those choices, not the few wealthy people with their foundations and philanthropies, which they use more for tax deduction than anything else. So, a more egalitarian society would be part of that hopeful future. And it's like I said, there are role models out there of other countries. No country is perfect. And so it's not like we got to reinvent the wheel or create something new. So.
And you cover a lot of this in your book, Michael.
Yeah, I talk a lot.
Michael next year on his new book and bring those ideas forward when you're ready to publish it.
Yeah, it's going to be out somewhere between the first part of the year and August, I think, or September. But yeah, I go into a lot and propose solutions that are not that complicated. A big part of it is really changing the psychology and consciousness to allow for that. As I point out, we have to go towards a society, what's called a post-scarcity society or post-scarcity economy, where we go from scarcity to abundance. Our capitalist system is based on scarcity, and we really go towards abundance. And I don't mean that in the metaphysical use of the word term scarcity abundance, but in the economic terms. It was John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist, who talked about a society of abundance, a post-scarcity society. And the capability is there to go there. Certain things are scarce or to be protected. Our commons, our air, our water, our soil, those are not to be abused. But so much of our society, if we work towards a collaborative nature, there's enough for everyone. And to get away from, people hoarding for themselves. So yeah, so that's really, gives us hope, because we can understand when we see what we can go towards and see that it's not that complicated, and there's just, tyranny of minority that's holding that dam of denial, as Susan put forth. We just have to keep, with the power of love, perhaps, just move that dam, put the holes in the dam. Yeah, I mean, Adair, that's what you talk about, that new operating system predicated on love.
Yeah, the changing an operating system, and it's really big. The historical research I did when I was writing that book is we've been in the third chakra paradigm for about 5,000 years. So this is no small transition that we're going to see all of, even in any of our lifetimes. Oh, you have it, Amy. Thank you.
Right.
It's a pretty big deal, and we're not going to, like I say, we're not going to see all of the other side of it in our lifetimes. Maybe someone very young will see, more of it, but you can see that it's already happening. And I've seen, even since I wrote that book, so much evidence of, more peer-to-peer collaboration, more awakening of diversity, more valuing of diversity, more reaching out in compassion to those less fortunate. And even though, we have the old system, the cries of the people really is the majority, is more for a growth of diversity and cooperation. And I see that the problems that we are facing are the perfect problems, the perfect evolutionary drivers to force humans and countries to collaborate and cooperate, because that is the only way they're going to solve them. And the pandemic is one of them. Look at how quickly this Omicron got all over the world. In less than a week. Obviously, it was there before we discovered it, but it is showing us as one human organism, and that they're, and part of what allowed it is people are realizing the rich countries had the vaccines and didn't give them to the poor countries, and that allowed it to mutate. And so there is this, again, nature is reminding us, cooperate, collaborate, put it together, not take it apart. And that is the way that and if you don't, we'll get hit with something else, and we'll get hit with something else. But it has to come from global cooperation. And these are the evolutionary drivers, the disturbances in the system that are irritating the system to evolve to its next level. And it's hard to go through.
Yeah. And that's another, and to add on to what you were saying, Anna, it's really moving towards an open society where these intellectual property laws aren't holding us back from one another. Some parts of intellectual property are necessary, but as you say, like the vaccines, they were developed in an open way in an open source way, and then the drug companies patented them and decided who got them and who didn't. And whatever you think of vaccines, it's just wrong for that to have happened, that they can decide, oh, now we're going to license it at a very low cost way to the global South. But this, I gave an example in my book, my very last chapter, and I used Star Trek as the example, the amazing, beautiful utopia, as best as possible, that Star Trek Federation attempted. And what I said was that one of the things that allowed, and this is science fiction, of course, that allowed the Star Trek future to happen was in the 24th century, was the replicator. And the replicator, of course, is science fiction. The replicator allows the holder of the replicator to create anything. So Captain Jean-Luc Picard would always get his tea with the replicator. But what I said, when maybe a replicator, well, like 3D printing perhaps might be the closest approximation right now. But what I pointed out is that the replicator is one thing, but what the Star Trek economy did was that the replicator was available to everyone for no cost. So if someone in our society created a replicator, let's just say, they would patent it and they would sell it for maybe $1 million because of its value. And that person, there'd be like lots of millionaires and billionaires who would be wanting it and hoarding it to protect themselves from cataclysmic futures. But in this Star Trek economy, the replicator was available to everyone. So that's the same thing with these intellectual property. Something needs to be available for everyone. So that's my say. That's my spiel.
Anyone who hasn't spoken want to put a couple words in? Just hit the reaction button and raise your hand. Well, if that's the case, then perhaps it is time to wrap this up. And to thank everyone for your continued presence on the calls. We will continue next year, I think. And for the people who have spoken with us this year, thank you, Michael, both Michaels. And just, write to us. You can write to, I'm annadeaj@gmail.com of topics or speakers you would like to have, or you can write to Michael. Maybe I don't have your email off the top of my head, but
I just put it in there. Anyway, for anyone who's not, mwayne2@mac.com, for anyone who's not on my email list and would like to get the essays I've been writing every couple of weeks that are ideas for my book, feel free to email me, or just keep coming to our talks, or if you're on Adea's email, you'll get the information about the talks. So anyway, but yeah, thank you, Anadea. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Susan, who's no longer here. Thank you, all of everyone who showed up tonight and is with us in spirit. We really appreciate all of you. So it's wonderful. And it's wonderful to keep promoting, you know, what voices for the future, for a hopeful future. So
let's all hold that. And happy holidays, everyone, as we go round the bend into the darkest time of the year in the Northern Hemisphere anyway, and give the rebirth of the sun and the rebirth of a new year, 2022. Let's hope that we steer the world in the direction it needs to go to unfold. Thank you all for your participation, and we'll see you next year. Happy holidays.
yeah, thank you, and have a good
Thank you.
year. Thank you.
And Michael Benny Lee, I'm teaching
Thank
a
you.
course in regenerative leadership. Would love to have you as a guest speaker. So maybe I'll email you
Thank you
later
for
about
this
that.
wonderful program. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.